It's recently come to my attention that some people are finding the KA-50's flight control system to be more of a liability than an asset. I'm not an expert, but I have a little bit of experience in the aircraft, and I want to show you some of the ways that I make it easy for me to fly the KA-50. Right now, the simulation's paused. I want to start by drawing your attention to the autopilots down here. This is the flight director switch. I highly recommend mapping this to your HOTAS. This is altitude hold. It's disabled along with flight director. They're dim. These three are lit: pitch, bank, and heading. You always want these top two lit. Heading, sometimes you turn it off and on for a specific reason. I'll get into that shortly. Altitude hold does what you'd expect. Flight director we'll get to shortly. So I'm going to unpause it now. And the first thing I'm going to do is hit right control enter. Look in the lower left. That shows my rudder and my cyclic settings. When I move the cyclic around, you can see the diamond move. When I move the rudder around, you can see that. Alright, now I'm just sort of hovering over my home airfield here. I'm going to get going towards waypoint 1 by turning on flight director. You can click this, but like I say, have it on your HOTAS. When you turn it on, you get those two bars there on either side of your pitch indicator. And this, when flight director's on, the computers basically don't interfere with you. They provide a little bit of artificial stability to keep the helicopter a little bit easier to fly, but nothing will try to pull you back onto a particular course. If I skew over here with my rudder, then it doesn't try to pull me back onto course. I'm using my rudder again. You can actually see it in that lower display there. Flight director lets you just fly this thing
Lower
like
gear.
a helicopter. Yeah. All right.
Lower gear.
So as I speed up a little bit, my trim needs are going to change. When you're in a hover, you want a little bit of left rudder. When you're flying at speed, you want a little bit of right rudder. But we're not going fast enough that we need that much right rudder. So I'm going to rapidly speed up. Right now, I'm not hitting the trimmer. I will soon, though. Look for the orange lights on that overhead panel there. Those two orange lights mean you're applying too much collective, and you're running the risk of the rotors intersecting one another. It's a risk of a rotor strike, which immediately drops your helicopter. I mean, at this altitude, you might not even have a chance to eject. I just hit the trimmer there. When I tap the trimmer and immediately release it, it sounds like this. When I hold it down and then release it later, holding it down like that and releasing it like that. Now, when you tap the trimmer, you have to center the stick before it'll start to behave again. If I turn left, tap the trimmer, and okay, well it's not doing it now. But the point is, you're supposed to have to center the stick before you'll have control of the aircraft again. I think I might have accidentally brought it back to center when I was wiggling it around. I'm just going to try and trim out here towards waypoint 1. I'm going to cruise at about 275, which I'm already at. I'm going to try not to go much over that because maximum airspeed right now would be about 290, and I want to have a little bit of wiggle room. Now I'm manually using collective and cyclic and rudder because I've still got flight director turned on. But now that I'm pretty much lined up here, I'm going to hit the trimmer and I'm going to turn flight director off. Now there's an autopilot that wants to keep me going in this direction. If I hit hard left rudder, I'll swing this way, and then I neutralize the rudder. I'm not touching the pedals, but it's going to try and bring me right back towards that diamond that I was flying to earlier. And this may be where some of you are feeling that the aircraft is fighting you. If you don't want that to happen, turn on flight director. It'll just do what you tell it to. It won't overinterpret. Now, about the heading autopilot, the heading hold. If I turn this off, if my, right now my ship is really well trimmed, so it's still going straight, but it doesn't, but if it were out of trim, it would start drifting to the left or to the right. Okay, I'm going to turn it back on, right? And now I'm going to put the rudder out of trim. This is badly out of trim. While it's still on autopilot, it'll keep trying to point me towards that diamond, and compensate for the error in the rudder trim. But if I hit Shift H and disable that, then all of a sudden, boom, I start to swing out wide. So if you want to see whether or not your heading trim is appropriate, you can always disable the autopilot channel for that. I've hit the trimmer. And it didn't work because I had the button deselected. My fault. Okay, so heading hold is on. I'm going to hold the trimmer in. When you hold the trimmer in, even though flight director's not on, it basically behaves as though it is. Hold the trimmer in, get myself back on course, release the trimmer. Now the autopilot's keeping us on course here. If I hit Shift H, I find that I've trimmed too far to the right. I'm starting to drift a little bit that way. So I'm going to hope that corrected it about right. I'm going to turn off autopilot, or the heading channel, and I've overcorrected. Now I'm drifting to the left a little bit, but you know what? It's close enough. If I really want to get it right, I'll pop on flight director so I've got full control. Steer it towards the diamond. Hit the trimmer and drop flight director. That should be about right. If I turn off heading, it hiccuped a little bit, but now it's basically holding steady. Alright, that'll do. So that's pretty much flight director and the heading trick. Some people will move the cyclic around even when flight director is not engaged, and then try to hit the trimmer, and then you release the and it does something. It does something different. I probably didn't illustrate it very well right there. Oh, we're already at waypoint 1. Let's bump it over to 2. Oh, this is a good time to use the heading thing. Heading hold, hard left. Bring it around to the diamond and Shift H to turn it back on, release the rudder, and the computer will just get you on the right track. It remembers what direction you were pointing in when you hit Shift H, and it'll try to drag you back onto that heading. I feel like I actually don't have this very well trimmed, so I'm going to turn on flight director. That was a case of not centering the stick, and so I didn't have control of the aircraft, and so I made an erratic movement by mistake out of panic. Okay. Let's see if I can, fucking Evernote. Gotta disable that before I make videos. Not to worry, this isn't a really important one. This is just something to stick on the forums so that you guys can see from within my cockpit when I'm aligning this thing. Now, you'll notice in the lower left, this is a much less dramatic trim situation. Before I had the rudder way out to one side and the cyclic way off to the other side. That's not an efficient way to fly. realizing that that's probably a bit heavy-handed. Like if I tried to fly with that trim configuration, it would basically be okay, but I would have trouble controlling the aircraft because because the control inputs are so close to the extremes, right? So let's see, Shift H. Nah, that's beautiful, man. I'm not even drifting. Shift H again. We're sinking a little bit. I'm going to turn on. I'm going to give it just a inch of collective to bring it closer to 0 on its own, and then I'm going to turn on the altitude hold. I also have this on my HOTAS. Next to it is a toggle switch, barometric or radar altitude. Right now we're on barometric, which means that it's not going to try and terrain follow. Right now I'm at 266 meters, and if I fly over a telephone pole, I'll be at 200 meters. And if you're on barometric, it won't try to lift you up over that telephone pole to keep your altitude or your radar altitude consistent. It will just keep you at the same barometric altitude. If you do want to do terrain following, if you're really low to the ground, go to radar altitude hold. I'm going to kill altitude hold, turn on flight director, and dive. Let's get nice and low to the ground after this ridge, this very low ridge. When I'm in flight director and I feel like I've got the aircraft pointed in a fairly consistent and stable direction, I hit the trimmer, and then I release the stick, and my rudder pedals, because you got to do both in order to get control back. Alright, I'm gonna kind of steer into the riverbed here, get her nice and low to the ground, and do radar following. We're descending, let's say 15 meters is good. Let's say 12 meters is good. Now that I've got radar altitude hold on, I can afford to stay dangerously close to the ground, and this thing will just make up for the little bumps in the terrain. When you're sitting in the cockpit, you'll see it pitch back and forth a fair bit, and it can feel like it's being silly, but to an outside observer, they barely notice that. You still look cool and badass. I checked, so don't worry about that. Now, we're coming up to a little rise here. We're going slow. We're doing about 160. That's only a little over half of our top speed. But we're also doing this at 12 meters, and I want to give it a little bit of a chance to be able to cope. Let's see. I think that's actually most of what I wanted to say about not fighting the FCS in the Black Shark. You can make this thing work for you. I mean, I'm not touching the rudder. I'm not touching the cyclic. I'm just pointing it in a direction and letting it go. I'm free to manage my waypoints down here. It's really nice when it works for you. It can give you that extra time you need to take a look at your systems. Well, I think that's about everything. Cheers. Happy flying.